Major information overload coming your way. So get ready to take notes, brace yourself. In fact, I would grab your Chapter 3.1 chapter summary handout because on that chapter summary handout, I think on the back page of it, is a really important image for this discussion. It's this one. To be considered standard form, a categorical syllogism has to possess not only the properties that we discussed in the earlier lecture, but also properties associated with its form. Okay, we have two premises. They can't just be in any old order. There's a very specific structure to a categorical syllogism that's considered standard form. One thing to take note of is that the subject term of our conclusion statement is called our minor term. So in a categorical syllogism, the subject term of the conclusion is called the minor term of the argument. And the predicate term of the conclusion is called our major term. Now what's important is that that minor term is also going to appear somewhere here in the second premise, either as the subject or the predicate of the second premise. And because it appears, the minor term appears somewhere in the second premise is called the minor premise. And the major term, the predicate term of the conclusion, it's also going to appear somewhere here in the first premise, okay? It's going to appear either as the subject term or the predicate term of the first premise, but because it appears in the first premise is called the major premise. Now, if you're as keen as I know you are, you're like, wait a minute, you said there's three terms that appear in these standard form categorical syllogisms, and so far you've only identified two, the minor and major term, and you're right. The third term is called the middle term, and that term is going to appear in both of the premise statements, but not the conclusion. Okay, so when we have a standard form categorical syllogism, it's going to look something like this. No men who are disrespectful are men who are desirable. All men who are jerks are men who are disrespectful. Therefore, no men who are jerks are men who are desirable. And you can see here, we've got our three terms, and they appear exactly the same way two times each. Okay, that was a really important point. In a standard form categorical syllogism, we have three terms that appear the same way two times each, the exact same way, letter for letter. So you can see down here, we've got our minor term, the subject of the conclusion, also appearing here in the second premise, and our major term, the predicate of the conclusion, appears the exact same way up here in the major premise, the first premise, and our middle term, men who are disrespectful, appears in both premises, but not the conclusion. So we have a standard form categorical syllogism here. Now, you're going to take a test. The test is this. You want to look at this argument I'm going to present you and see, are all three statements that make up this argument expressed as standard form statements? Does it have three terms? And do those three terms appear two times each? And the two times those terms appear, do they appear identically, letter for letter? And each time the term is used it used the same way? In other words, is it referring to the same thing? And not most importantly, but equally important, are the premises in the right order? In other words, does the major premise appear first, and the minor premise appear second, and the conclusion last? You tell me. Here's the argument. All students who study philosophy are super cool people. That's true. All super cool people are people who will succeed in life. Therefore, all students who study philosophy are people who will succeed in life. All right. We have three statements. They're all in standard form. Do we have three terms that appear twice? Yes. We have students who study philosophy, super cool people, and people who will succeed in life. The two occurrences of each term are identical, so we've satisfied that criteria. And it looks to me like each term is used the same way throughout the argument. But I see a problem when it comes to our last criteria. Do you see it? What's the major term? The major term is the predicate of the conclusion, people who would succeed in life. And that appears in the second premise, not the first. But I know from this image here that the predicate of the conclusion has to appear somewhere up here in the first premise, and it does not. So this is not a standard form categorical syllogism. It's a categorical syllogism, but it doesn't meet all of the requirements for being in standard form. And as a consequence, there's going to be a lot of things I can't do to this that I could do if I simply flipped the premises. If I flip the order of the premises, then I'll have my major premise where it needs to be, the first premise. And that's what I would do. All right? Now take a look at this argument. You tell me, does it meet all of our criteria? Here's the argument. All windows that are open are windows that can be closed by clicking the X button in the upper right corner of the screen. Some windows in the house are windows that are open. Therefore, some windows in the house are windows that can be closed by clicking the X button in the upper right-hand corner of the screen. I've got all three statements expressed in standard form, and we do have three terms: windows that are open, windows that can be closed by clicking X, the X button in the upper right-hand corner, and windows in the house. Okay, so we've got three terms that appear 2 times each, and they do appear the same exact way each time, but our terms aren't used the same way each time. Okay, we have this one term, windows that are open. In premise number 1, it seems to be referring to the windows on a computer screen, right? You click that little X button in the upper right-hand corner and it closes the window on the computer screen that's open. But premise number 2 seems to be using windows that are open in reference to like windows on the side of a wall that are open. And those aren't the same thing, even though they're worded the exact same way. Those aren't the same thing. So again, this argument fails as a standard form categorical syllogism.